Hey guys, welcome to Sippin Spillin with Syd and apparently Mr. Bunko. He's like, you know him, he likes to be on camera from 3 Mississippi. All right guys, safety's off. I'm gonna talk to you guys a little bit about chickens today because I've had a lot of questions lately on some older videos on 3 Mississippi and here on Sippin Spillin about chickens. We all know right now the price of eggs is higher than I've ever seen it. And there's a lot of people that they're going, oh man, I could just go get some chickens and I'll just have eggs. And while I am a huge advocate for if you're able to, if you're in a situation where you're able to have a few chickens, to do that, I think there's a lot of benefits to it, especially if you have kids and they get to kind of see the sciencey side of it and the nature side of it. But what I kind of want to address too is a couple of things having to do with a chicken's overall, how they need to be kept, their diet, how to take care of them, and kind of talk about some of these myths and truths and rumors about, why chickens stop laying or why they aren't laying and some of that a little bit. So let's get into it. So first of all, a chicken is an animal and an animal needs a certain amount of care, and every kind of animal needs a different kind of care, right? Some are more high maintenance than others. Chickens are a relatively low maintenance animal to have. This is true. However, you need a couple of them. They are kind of social. They have what's called a pecking order, and they need to have buddies, I guess you could say, which is true with most animals. Most animals need some kind of interaction with somebody else in their tribe, So with chickens, sometimes, people who've never had chickens before, they think, well, I could just put them like on a patio or whatever. And well, you could, but chickens, they want to forage. Their instinct is to kick and scratch up and turn over dirt and look for bugs and give themselves dust baths. And they need a little bit of room for that. So even if you're thinking, well, I'm only going to get 2 chickens, you need a little bit of a yard space to have those 2 birds and a safe place to put them up at night, depending on your predator level, where you're at. And the, I guess, safety level of your fencing and how private it is and all of that. And it's an expense. Yes, you can get baby chicks and you can build yourself a little brooder, put them in a stock tank or in a Rubbermaid tub and I don't like to use heat lamps. I use the heat, what do you call them? The heat plates, rather. It's like a chicken hot plate for your chicken nuggets. And those are much safer, in my opinion, and many other people's opinions, as far as keeping the fire hazard down from those heat lamps. Can be quite hazardous, and many people have burned down their garages, their houses, their barns, their sheds, their whatever, trying to keep those heat lamps on. So definitely something to look into if you're thinking about it. We do have some of those, I believe, listed on our Amazon store, those hot plates. I use them. Once I discovered those, I never went back to heat lamps. But there's a little bit of startup cost involved there with starting out with chicks. Now, of course, you can always find somebody who's maybe selling a pullet, which is a female chicken that is within that first year to point a lay, and pay maybe a little bit more for them, depending on the breed and who you're getting it from. If you're getting a backyard barnyard mix, you might only pay, $10 per bird. But if you're getting a, like an I am Sarami, I know I'm always saying that wrong. Everybody always says they say it wrong. You might be paying as much as $100 a bird. So it really just depends on what you're looking at in that sense. But you're not having to spend the money and go through the brooding process, and they're that much closer to providing you with those eggs, which is most likely your end result. So that is definitely something to keep in mind as an option. Then you've also got the fact that they are great as far as like little garbage disposals. And this is kind of getting into their diet here. Most people will buy laying pellets somewhere around 16 to 22%, depending on what their flock is like and what they're doing. And people always are surprised when I say this, but get ready to have your world rocked, okay? If you've never been around chickens before. Feed your chickens some meat, guys. I'm serious. Feed your chickens some meat. They are like little dinosaurs, and they need some of that meat. They need that protein, and they actually do so much better, and your egg production will be better if they get a certain amount of meat in their diet. Now, I'm not saying feed them a filet mignon 5 days a week, okay? I'm talking about your table scraps from dinner. I'm talking about anything that you trim off of maybe a roast that you're making and cook some of that up for them. It makes a huge difference. It also makes a difference in their aggression level with each other. So again, remember I was talking about your space for your birds, you know, depending on how many and how much space you're dedicating to your birds. If you've got, you know, several acres and they're free ranging and they have a coop for home base and a run, you're probably not having to deal with a whole lot of aggression with each other. If they are in a smaller, more confined space, perhaps with maybe more birds than that should be in that area, you're likely to see a lot more aggression between them, whether it's for, you know, mating purposes. Maybe if you have a mix, sometimes even if you just have all hens, you'll get one that decides it's going to be the rooster of the group and is the more dominant one, above and beyond just normal pecking order, like gets a little aggressive. Giving them that little extra bit of carnivorous offerings will increase their ability to just chill out and not be as aggressive with each other, not peck at each other, not kind of gang up on each other. I promise you, you will see a difference. And people think it's crazy. They don't understand, but they do need that. And then if you also have like the ability to give them garden scraps or even just, you know, cuttings from whatever vegetables that you're making, give them those too, especially if chickens are your only animals that you're raising. 100% give them those. They are great little garbage disposals when it comes to that stuff. And I am all about, I love when I'm able to eliminate anything that's would typically be considered waste or get thrown out. If I can feed it to the birds, I will. The only thing that the birds really kind of need to stay away from as a rule of thumb is you want to make sure you're not giving them onions. And most of the time, if something has a little bit of onion in it, they won't eat it. Same thing with pigs, they won't do it. And then avocado. There's different schools of thought on that because of the skin of the avocado versus the meat of the avocado, which is okay and which is not. I just, as a rule of thumb, I don't feed them avocado. And that's just to be on the safe side. But really, with the cost of avocados, who's feeding avocados to their livestock, right? So yeah, but give them, you know, your garden scraps, your kitchen scraps, your meat scraps. You know, we always kind of say something like when we had like pigs and chickens and all of that, it was always like, well, the chickens get the pig scraps from when we cook something from them, and the hogs get the chicken scraps from when we cook something of theirs, if that makes sense. So I'm not feeding chicken to my chicken. I will on occasion feed them some scrambled eggs when I have, you know, a little leftover, or let's say I'm you know, maybe only using the yolks for something or only the whites for something. I'll cook up the other piece and give it to them. Cooked, they don't know, so it's not going to encourage them to become egg eaters and start pecking at their eggs or anything like that. But that is always a good rule of thumb. It will help their laying production, and you'll just notice that they're just not going to be as aggressive. Another thing, guys, is they don't lay an egg every day, 365 days a year. They just don't. They go through cycles, just like the weather, just like the seasons. They go through cycles. So they are going to slow down when the days start to get shorter and the weather starts to get colder. And again, this is going to depend on where you are in the world and what your weather's like. They are going to slow down production. So usually you notice a drop off at the end of summer, and when it starts to turn colder, maybe in October or November, depending on where you are. And then they're going to pick up Usually you get a few that start kind of picking up right around February, which is right now. There's kind of been like a resting period. And even though the weather's still cold, you're starting to see some glimpses of spring and have a few warmer days in between rains and freezes and things like that. And you'll start to see them spitting out another egg here and there. Okay. Keeping their protein levels up during the winter can help with that. But here's the thing, they naturally cycle, and also depending on the age of your hen, that cycle is going to vary a little bit. So what people need to realize is, yes, you can trick them with putting in a light in their coop, or putting in heat in their coop, and tricking them into thinking it's summertime, right? Yes, you can do that, and yes, it will increase your egg production during those colder months. But I say give the girls a break. I have always been of this school of thought not to trick their bodies. I think for longevity of your flock and for happy, healthy hens and good egg production overall over the course of their life, let the girls take a couple months off. And if you were doing your job as a good chicken keeper, you save some of those eggs that they were just cranking out like crazy during those hot months. If you've got, a handful of hens and they were making more eggs for you than you could eat during the summer, hopefully you're water glassing them, or you're freezing them, or you're preserving them, pickling the eggs and storing them, however you like to do it. Hopefully you've saved some in some form that you then can use them for yourself during those months when their production has slowed down. And worst case, you go to a farmer's market or you go to a supermarket and you buy a few eggs. And I find too that like during those months, I typically, when they're not available, because I like to eat what's available at the time. So when it's not available, we don't need as many eggs. And when they're back in production, we start adding, I make more quiches, So that being said, you can do with that information what you want. Personally, I like to give the girls a break, let them run through their natural course. And right along with that, after their first year, a hen will typically, somewhere between the 15 to 18 month mark, will go through a molt. And when they molt, that first molt can be jarring. Sometimes a bird will go all the way down to looking almost naked, where they almost look like they've been attacked because they've got just hunks of feathers missing. Your yard's going to look like somebody got eaten sometimes, especially if there's been like a little bit of wind in between. And you'll start to see the little, I call them little porcupine chickens, when they start to get the pin feathers coming through, and they just look spiky on one side and kind of like a hot mess on the other. And sometimes they get a little sunburn almost on their skin if it doesn't start growing back fast enough. So when they're going through their molt, offer them some extra things, extra protein, extra treats, things. I love to give mine black fly larvae when they're going through their molt. You can give them black oil sunflower seeds. Again, a little extra meat doesn't hurt. Just to help them through that molt, because it's their body kind of recycling, regenerating those feathers, and getting those new healthy feathers in, and it takes a lot of their energy. So allowing them to have that rest during the winter, a lot of times their molt will kind of again, I've had birds go into molts to different degrees. Some birds will molt and you'll hardly know it because they do it so gradually, it's not really visible to the naked eye. But then some, it's like, whoa, that's a bad haircut. What happened to you? So you just kind of know your flock, and you'll know, when it's happening, but just, give them some grace. They're not going to be laying so much when they're molting. So just keep that in mind as well. And it may or may not coincide with the beginning or end of winter. It just depends. I have had birds molt at all different times of the year, all different breeds, and there doesn't seem to be any real rhyme or reason to it. It can happen anytime. It just is what it is. So, and then I know a lot of people, kind of getting back to the food thing, and I'm just going to address this just so it's addressed, but I'm not going to get into it. I know there was a lot of talk the last few weeks on this wide web internet of ours, about the feed that was causing, potentially causing chickens not to lay, and a lot of people freaking out about that. Look, I'm not going to get into that. I feel like if you're feeding your birds correctly and not feeding them just so much layer or pellets, and you're giving them the scraps and letting them free range, letting them scratch the earth and get bugs and eat grass and do all of those things, guess what? They're still going to stop laying around this time of year. They're still going to slow down or stop. That is normal. Completely 100% normal. Outside of that, I'm not going to comment on, but it just seemed like, I know we got a lot of new chicken people in 2020. We had a lot of people that, because of what was going on in the world in 2020, they were like, I'm going to get backyard chickens. And they're now to the point where they still, maybe even though they've had chickens for a while, maybe aren't that educated on them and don't understand that molting is normal and egg production slows down. Winter is normal and egg production slows down or stops. So I think that there has been an upheaval in the internet, partially due to just ignorance. And I don't say ignorance to mean in a negative way, just the not knowing. It's just, you don't know until you know. And now when you know, then you can be like, oh, I see, that's normal, so it is what it is. Do with that what you will. But my birds, I only have a couple right now that are at the point of lay. And they're, again, I feed them chicken scraps, I feed them meat. They're not in their permanent area yet because we're still building the coop, so they're not able to free range yet, because right now I'm just more focused on keeping them safe from predators. So I am having to supplement their diet quite a bit. And I will tell you this, they started laying and then it got cold and then they stopped laying and now they're starting to lay again. And I've been getting, a couple eggs every couple days now from them. And I haven't changed anything about their diet. It's simply the weather. It's simply the time of year. The days are starting to get longer. The week that it was noticeable to me that the days were getting longer, the birds started laying. I'm telling you, it's science. It's science, guys. Anyway, so again, as much as I advocate getting chickens, and I know there's some of you that may be embarrassed to ask certain questions, like, and not to make fun of anybody who ever asks questions, because sometimes the internet can be a scary place to Google something. I get it. But like, for example, I've had people ask me in the past, do I have to have a rooster if I want to have hens? The answer is no. Do I have to have a rooster if I want her to lay eggs? The answer is no. A hen will lay eggs whether or not there's a rooster anywhere around. Do you have to have a rooster in order to have eggs be fertile? Yes, 100%. If you want to have your hen's eggs be fertilized to be able to hatch out eggs, or let her hatch out eggs in order to have chicks, 100%, you need a man. You need to find a rooster on Tinder and sign him up for the job. So, but if you're just wanting to have a couple girls in the back simply for egg production, maybe you're in a neighborhood or in a zone where you can only have hens and you're not allowed to have roosters, your girls will still lay, except for in the winter, except for when they're molting. So that's just something to keep in mind, guys. And as always, I encourage you, ask questions. If you're not sure about something when it comes to chicken care, what they need, I know a lot of people have said to me like, well, I'd love to have chickens, but I'm scared of them. A lot of people have a fear of beaks, which that's a thing. I didn't know, but a lot of people are scared. I would say start out with something small, hold some chicks, and then maybe hold a pullet that's, maybe 4 or 5 weeks old. And then, kind of work your way up to the big dinosaur and see how you do. But, even when a chicken pecks you, it doesn't hurt. It's like going like this. It's nothing. So again, I 100% encourage you to look into it if you're serious about it. But I also want you guys to consider another option if you're in a confined area, but you're still wanting to have eggs, still wanting to be a little bit more self-sufficient. Again, quail are a wonderful option for that. You need a very small space. Most places that have zoning in regards to chicken and other livestock do not have any regulations when it comes to quail. So they kind of are under the radar. Same thing with rabbits a lot of times too, but rabbits don't lay eggs unless it's Easter, and then it's Cadbury eggs. I'm kidding. That's a joke. But quail eggs, 3 quail eggs equal the size of one chicken egg. They are packed with a lot of nutrients. They can be kept in a very small area. Now, again, they start laying really, really early. So most chickens won't start laying until they're between, I know there's some breeds that will start laying around 4 months, but I say comfortably between 5 to 7 months. And most breeds it's closer to 7. Your colored layers sometimes will take as much as 8 months, like some of your olive eggers and your Easter eggers, some of those specialty breeds that are those cross breeds like that. For some reason, in my experience, they have always taken long time to produce an egg. So you've got to remember, you're raising that chick, you're feeding that chick, and then all of a sudden, you know, almost a whole year's gone by, and then you're finally getting an egg as payoff. And they don't have as high egg production. So definitely something to think about when you're thinking about just having a small amount of birds for your own eggs. Look at how many eggs a year on average does this breed lay versus this breed. And sometimes it's a difference of like 150 eggs a year between two breeds. It can be drastic. So anyway, but quail, very nutrient rich, dense eggs. Again, 3 of them equal the size of one chicken egg, which I know sounds like a lot, but they lay during their laying span. They will lay very, very consistently, very consistently. Again, they will slow down in colder months, but they only live. I know some people have had them live up to 5 years. I say to be on the safe side, you figure lifespan and production levels, you're looking at like 1.5 to 2 years. So with getting into quail, typically you do want to think about incubating them on your own, keeping a few roosters in another level that you can add together, fertilize the eggs, take him back out, put him by himself, whatever. And then you can hatch out your own, and they are wonderful for meat as well. So just something to consider if you're kind of thinking like, oh, I want a few chickens, but I don't have the space for them. You probably have enough space for quail. It is a little bit more of a commitment, especially because you got to cycle through them a little bit faster. Whereas a chicken, you know, you're looking at more like 5 to 10 years on a chicken. On average, I would say you're probably looking more at like 6 to 7 years for the average chicken that's kept well. But yeah, 100%. Definitely encourage you guys to get into poultry, but like learn what you're looking into. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And I hope I answered some questions for you. Maybe I blew your mind about some stuff. Maybe you didn't know that chickens like to eat meat. They do. They are little carnivores. They will gobble it up. So anyway, guys, that was today's Sippin and Spillin. I had so many questions this last week about chickens and eggs and which came first that I just thought I'd come out here and have a little chat with y'all about it. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed. Feel free to drop a question or a comment down below, and we will see you next time. Bye.